Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the UES Defiant. He was a tall man with brown hair and calm blue eyes. Jake had been fighting in space for 15 years. He had seen many battles, but nothing like what was coming toward them now. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of computers. The crew worked at their stations, watching the screens that showed the darkness of space around them. Everyone knew something terrible was about to happen. Commander Lisa Kane walked up to Jake. She was his second in command, a smart woman with short black hair and green eyes. Lisa had served with Jake for 5 years. They trusted each other completely. "Captain," Lisa said in a low voice, "we just lost contact with the Centauri colonies. The last message was not good." Jake turned to look at her. "What did they say?" "They said the enemy ships were too big and too strong. They said everyone should run." Then the signal stopped. Jake felt cold inside. The Centauri system had millions of people living there. Families, children, workers, teachers, farmers. Now they were all gone, destroyed by an enemy that showed no mercy. The enemy was called the Cathani Dominion. They were aliens made of living crystal who had been conquering the galaxy for 200 years. Every planet they found, they destroyed. Every ship they met, they crushed. No one had ever stopped them. No one had even slowed them down. Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner sat at the weapons station. He was young, maybe 25, with red hair and freckles. Alex looked up from his screen with worry in his eyes. "Captain, I'm picking up ships on long-range sensors. They're big. Really big." Jake walked over to look at Alex's screen. The sensors showed 3 massive objects moving through space toward them. Each one was the size of a small moon. These were Cathani dreadnoughts, the most powerful warships ever built. "How long until they get here?" Jake asked. "About 30 minutes, sir." Jake looked around the bridge. His crew was good, the best he had ever worked with. But they had never faced anything like this. Nobody had. Chief Engineer Maria Rodriguez spoke through the ship's communication system. She was working down in the engine room, keeping the ship running. Maria was tough and smart, the kind of person who could fix anything. "Captain, I'm getting reports from the refugee ships. They're scared and their engines are damaged. Some of them can barely move." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. Behind his ship were 17 civilian vessels full of people who had escaped from Centauri. 40,000 men, women, and children who had lost everything. They were running for their lives in ships that were falling apart. The refugees had old transport ships, cargo vessels, and passenger liners. None of them had weapons. None of them could fight. They were helpless. "How long before the refugee ships can jump to hyperspace?" Jake asked. Lisa checked her computer. "At least 45 minutes. Maybe an hour. Their jump drives are damaged." Jake understood the situation perfectly. The enemy would arrive in 30 minutes. The refugees needed 45 minutes to escape. His ship, the Defiant, would have to hold off 3 enemy dreadnoughts for 15 minutes. It was impossible. The Defiant was a heavy cruiser, one of the most powerful ships in the human fleet. But compared to a Cathani dreadnought, it was like a mouse fighting an elephant. 3 elephants. Navigator Lieutenant Ben Carter spoke from his station. He was a quiet man with brown skin and careful eyes. Ben always knew exactly where they were and where they needed to go. "Captain, the nearest Earth defense fleet is 6 hours away. We could call for help." "They would never get here in time," Jake said. "Those people behind us don't have 6 hours. They don't even have 1 hour." Jake walked to the center of the bridge and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, death was coming. The Cathani had destroyed hundreds of worlds. They had killed billions of people. They never stopped, never slowed down, never showed mercy. But today was different. Today, 40,000 innocent people were depending on one ship and its crew. Lieutenant Commander Helen Brooks sat at the pilot controls. She was the best pilot Jake had ever seen, able to make the big ship dance through space like a fighter. Helen had blonde hair and blue eyes, and she never backed down from a challenge. "Captain," Helen said, "what are your orders?" Jake thought about his options. He could order the ship to retreat. That would save his crew, but it would mean certain death for the refugees. He could try to evacuate some of the civilians onto his ship, but there was no way to save them all. Or he could stay and fight. Jake opened a communication channel to the entire ship. His voice was calm and steady. "All hands, this is the captain. In 30 minutes, we are going to face an enemy that has never been defeated. They have destroyed entire star systems. They have crushed every fleet that stood against them." He paused, looking around at his crew. They were all listening, waiting for his next words. Behind us are 40,000 people who did nothing wrong. They are teachers and doctors, farmers and workers, parents and children. They are running for their lives, and we are the only thing standing between them and death. Jake took a deep breath. I won't lie to you. We probably won't survive this fight, but sometimes survival isn't what matters. Sometimes what matters is that we stand up and say no more. Sometimes what matters is that we hold the line. The bridge was completely quiet. Everyone understood what the captain was saying. They were going to fight and probably die, but they were going to do it to save innocent people. Anyone who wants to leave can take an escape pod now, Jake continued. I won't think less of anyone who chooses to live. But if you stay, we fight together. We hold the line together. Nobody moved. Nobody left their station. The crew of the Defiant had made their choice. Lisa stepped up beside Jake. Orders, Captain? Jake smiled slightly. He was proud of his crew, proud to serve with such brave people. Battle stations. Prepare for combat. And Maria? Yes, Captain? Give me everything the engines have got. We're going to need every bit of speed and power to pull this off. The Defiant began to turn toward the approaching enemy. On the sensors, the 3 Cathani dreadnoughts grew larger and larger. Death was coming, but humanity would not run. Not today. Today they would hold the line. The first Cathani ship appeared out of hyperspace like a nightmare made real. It was enormous, stretching 15 kilometers from front to back. The hull was made of dark crystal that caught the light from nearby stars and threw it back in strange colors. Red, blue, green, and purple lights danced across its surface like fire. Jake Morrison watched the enemy ship on his main screen and felt his stomach drop. He had seen pictures of Cathani dreadnoughts before, but seeing one in person was different. It was like looking at a mountain that could fly and shoot death rays. Then the second ship appeared. Then the third. 3 massive dreadnoughts hung in space like dark gods. They moved slowly and carefully, as if they had all the time in the world. They probably did. Nothing had ever successfully fought them before. Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner stared at his weapon control screen. The numbers he was seeing didn't make sense. They couldn't be right, Captain, Alex said, his voice shaking slightly. I'm reading their weapon signatures. Sir, each one of those ships has enough firepower to destroy a planet. How much firepower exactly? Jake asked. Alex swallowed hard. Each ship has about 1,000 times more weapons than we do. If all 3 of them fired at us at the same time, they could vaporize us instantly. Commander Lisa Kane stood next to Jake, studying the tactical display. She was trying to find some weakness, some way they could possibly win this fight. So far, she wasn't finding anything hopeful. Captain, those ships are spreading out into attack formation. They're going to surround us, Jake nodded. The Cathani weren't stupid. They had been fighting for 200 years. They knew how to destroy an enemy ship quickly and efficiently. Chief Engineer Maria Rodriguez called from the engine room. Captain, I've got the engines running at maximum power. But sir, looking at those ships, I don't think speed is going to be enough. What about weapons? Jake asked. Can we hurt them? There was a pause. Maria was probably checking all her systems, making sure she gave him accurate information. Our railguns can punch through most ship armor, Maria said finally. But sir, those crystal hulls look different. I honestly don't know if our weapons will do anything to them. Jake felt the weight of 40,000 lives pressing down on him. Behind his ship, the refugee fleet was still struggling to repair their hyperspace drives. They needed more time, and he had to give it to them. On the enemy flagship, war leader Zethkar studied the human ship through his crystal eyes. Zethkar was old even by Cathani standards. He had been conquering worlds since before humans had left their home planet. He was tall and thin, made of dark purple crystal that shifted and changed color when he moved. Vorthak, Zethkar said to his second-in-command. What do you make of this human vessel? Vorthak was younger than his leader, made of blue crystal with silver veins running through his body. He had studied many alien species during the long conquest. It is small, war leader. Primitive. Their weapons appear to be simple kinetic projectiles. Their shields are weak electromagnetic barriers. Zethkar nodded slowly. And yet they do not run. Perhaps they are too frightened to move, Vorthak suggested. No, Zethkar said, watching the human ship on his display. Look at their position. They have placed themselves between us and those fleeing vessels. They are protecting the others. This was unusual. Most species the Cathani encountered either surrendered immediately or ran as fast as they could. Very few ever tried to fight, and none had ever stayed to protect others when they could have escaped. Should we offer them terms of surrender? Vorthak asked. Zethkar considered this. The Cathani did not usually offer surrender. They simply destroyed everything they found, but something about this situation was different. Open a communication channel, Zethkar decided. On the Defiant, Communications Officer Lieutenant Sarah Miller looked up from her station. She was a young woman with brown hair and smart eyes who could speak several alien languages. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the lead enemy ship. Put it on screen, Jake ordered. The main screen changed to show War Leader Zethkar. His crystal form was strange and beautiful and terrifying all at once. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Human vessel, Zethkar said. I am War Leader Zethkar of the Cathani Dominion. You are greatly outmatched. Withdraw now and your ship will be allowed to leave unharmed. Jake stood up from his command chair. He looked directly at the alien leader on the screen. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiant. We will not withdraw. We will not abandon the innocent people under our protection. Zethkar's crystal form shifted slightly, showing what might have been surprise. Captain Morrison, you cannot hope to defeat us. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. We have destroyed fleets 10 times larger than your single ship. Why do you choose certain death? Jake thought about the question. Why was he doing this? Why was his crew doing this? They could run. They could save themselves. But somehow that felt wrong. Some things were more important than staying alive. Because someone has to, Jake said simply. Someone has to stand up and say that innocent people matter. Someone has to draw a line and say no further. Zethkar was quiet for a long moment. In 200 years of conquest, no one had ever spoken to him like this. You interest me, human, the war leader said finally. But interest will not save you. You have 1 minute to reconsider. After that, we will destroy you. The communication ended. The main screen went back to showing the 3 enemy ships. Jake turned to his crew. They were all looking at him, waiting for orders. Well, you heard him, Jake said. 1 minute. Anyone having second thoughts? Nobody answered. Nobody moved from their stations. Lieutenant Commander Helen Brooks checked her flight controls. Captain, those ships are moving into attack positions. They're trying to surround us. Not if we move first, Jake said. Helen, take us straight at the lead ship. Maximum speed, sir? Helen looked surprised. You heard me. We're going to attack. Alex Turner looked up from his weapons station. Captain, what's the plan? Jake studied the tactical display. The enemy ships were huge and powerful, but they were also slow. The Defiant was much smaller and faster. Maybe, just maybe, he could use that. Those ships are built to fight other big ships, Jake explained. Their weapons are designed for long-range combat. If we can get in close, really close, they won't be able to target us effectively. Lisa understood immediately, like a fighter plane attacking a battleship. Exactly. We get in close, hit them as hard as we can, then get out before they can respond. It was a desperate plan, but it was the only plan they had. In 30 seconds, the most powerful enemy ships in the galaxy were going to start shooting at them. Jake sat back down in his command chair. All hands prepare for attack. This is going to get rough. The Defiant's engines roared to full power. The ship accelerated toward the enemy fleet like a bullet fired at a mountain. Behind them, the refugee ships continued their desperate repairs, racing against time. The battle was about to begin. The Defiant raced toward the enemy ships at maximum speed. Captain Jake Morrison gripped his command chair as the ship shook from the power of its engines. Around him, his crew worked frantically to prepare for the most dangerous battle of their lives. 30 seconds to weapons range. Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner called out from his station. The 3 Cathani dreadnoughts waited ahead like sleeping giants. Their crystal hulls gleamed in the starlight, beautiful and deadly. Each ship was so large that the Defiant could probably fly through their hangar. Base, shields at maximum power, reported. Commander Lisa Kane. All weapons ready to fire. Lieutenant Commander Helen Brooks kept the ship steady on its attack course. Her hands moved quickly over the flight controls, making tiny adjustments to keep them on target. Helen had never flown into a battle like this before. Nobody had. Captain, Chief Engineer Maria Rodriguez called from the engine room. I'm showing some strain on the main reactor. These engines weren't designed to run this hot for very long. How long can you give me? Jake asked. Maybe 10 minutes at full power. After that, we'll have to slow down or risk a core breach. 10 minutes. That wasn't very long to win an impossible battle. On the Cathani flagship, war leader Zethkar watched the human ship approach. The tiny vessel was moving incredibly fast, faster than most ships its size should be able to travel. Vorthak, are you certain their weapons cannot penetrate our shields? Zethkar asked. His second-in-command checked his tactical readings again. Impossible, war leader. Our shields have stopped planet-killing weapons. One small ship cannot threaten us. Zethkar nodded, but something felt wrong. In 200 years of conquest, he had learned to trust his instincts. And his instincts were telling him that these humans were different somehow. Prepare to fire, Zethkar ordered. Target their engines. I want to disable them, not destroy them. They interest me. The Cathani ships began to turn their massive weapons toward the approaching Defiant. Each weapon was the size of a building. When they fired, they could melt asteroids into vapor. Enemy ships are powering weapons, Alex reported. Energy signatures are off the charts. Jake made a quick decision. Helen, evasive maneuvers. Start zigzagging. Don't let them get a clean shot. The Defiant suddenly changed direction, sliding sideways through space like a fish swimming through water. Helen's skilled piloting made the ship dance between the enemy weapons as they tried to target it. Beams of deadly energy lanced out from the Cathani ships. Each beam was bright enough to blind anyone who looked directly at it. The beams passed close to the Defiant, but Helen kept the ship moving just fast enough to avoid them. Good flying, Jake said. Keep it up. The Defiant was now close enough to see details on the enemy ships. Their crystal hulls were covered with weapons, sensors, and armor plates. They looked like flying mountains covered in thorns. Weapons range in 5 seconds, Alex announced. Jake leaned forward in his chair. This was the moment of truth. Either their weapons would work, or they would all die in the next few minutes. Fire everything, Jake ordered. The Defiant's railguns opened up with a sound like thunder. Streams of metal projectiles shot out from the ship at incredible speed. Each projectile was the size of a car and moving fast enough to punch through solid rock. The projectiles slammed into the shields of the lead Cathani ship. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The enemy's shields absorbed the impact easily, just as they had absorbed the attacks of 1,000 other ships. But then something strange occurred. The shields began to flicker. What the hell? Alex stared at his readings in disbelief. Captain, I'm seeing fluctuations in their shield matrix. On the Cathani flagship, Vorthak was equally confused. War leader, their primitive weapons are having an effect on our shields. I don't understand how this is possible. Zethkar studied the readings carefully. The human weapons were simple kinetic projectiles, nothing special. But they were being fired in a very specific pattern, hitting the same spots on the shields over and over again. They are targeting our shield frequency, Zethkar realized. Somehow they have discovered our shield harmonics. It was impossible. The Cathani had kept their shield technology secret for centuries. No other species had ever figured out how their defenses worked, but the humans had. Somehow they had found the one weakness in Cathani's shield technology. The Defiant continued its attack run, pouring fire into the enemy shields. The shields flickered more and more with each hit. Cracks of energy began to show across the shield surface. Keep firing, Jake ordered. We're hurting them. But the Cathani were not helpless. The 3 dreadnoughts began to close their formation, trying to trap the small human ship between them. Their weapons tracked the Defiant as it zoomed past, firing constantly. Multiple energy beams incoming, Helen warned. She threw the ship into a sharp turn, engines screaming with effort. One of the energy beams passed so close that it scorched the Defiant's hull. The ship's armor glowed red hot where the beam had touched it. Hull breach on Deck 7, Lisa reported. Emergency bulkheads are sealing the damage. Jake knew they couldn't keep this up for long. The enemy had too many weapons and too much armor. Eventually, one of those energy beams would hit them directly, and that would be the end. But they had proved something important. The Cathani could be hurt. Alex, what's the status on their shields? Jake asked. The lead ship's shields are down to 60%. If we can keep hitting the same spot, we might be able to punch through. Then that's what we do. Helen, bring us around for another pass. The Defiant swung in a wide circle, avoiding the worst of the enemy fire. The ship's hull was covered with scorch marks and small holes, but it was still flying. Navigator Lieutenant Ben Carter looked up from his station with good news. Captain, the refugee ships report their hyperspace drives are almost ready. Maybe 5 more minutes. 5 minutes. They had to keep fighting for 5 more minutes. The second attack run was even more dangerous than the first. The Cathani had learned from the first attack and were ready for the humans. Their weapons tracked the Defiant more accurately and their formation was tighter. But Jake's crew had learned too. Alex concentrated all their firepower on the exact same spot on the enemy shields. Helen flew the ship in an unpredictable pattern that made them harder to hit. Maria pushed the engines beyond their safety limits to give them extra speed. The railguns hammered the same section of shield over and over. The shield flickered, sparked, and finally failed. "Shield breach," Alex shouted with excitement. "We've got a hole in their defenses." For the first time in 200 years, someone had punched through Cathani shields. War leader Zethkar felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Worry. All ships. "Concentrate fire on the human vessel," he ordered. "Destroy them now." The 3 dreadnoughts turned all their weapons toward the tiny Defiant. The space around the human ship filled with deadly energy beams. It looked like the ship was flying through a storm made of lightning. Jake knew they couldn't survive much more of this. But they had done the impossible. They had hurt the enemy. They had shown that the Cathani could be beaten. One more pass, Jake decided. "We're going to ram them." The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what the captain was saying. They were going to fly their ship directly into the enemy vessel. It would destroy both ships, but it might give the refugees the time they needed to escape. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "are you sure?" Jake looked around at his crew. These brave people had followed him into an impossible battle. They had fought against odds that no one should have to face. They deserved better than this. But 40,000 innocent people deserve to live. "I'm sure," Jake said. "Prepare for ramming speed." The bridge of the Defiant became very quiet as Captain Jake Morrison's words sank in. Ramming speed meant flying their ship directly into the enemy at maximum velocity. It meant certain death for everyone on board. Commander Lisa Kane stepped closer to Jake. Her voice was steady, but he could see the emotion in her green eyes. "Captain, if we ram them, we all die. You know that, right?" Jake nodded slowly. "I know. But look at the tactical display, Lisa. We can't win this fight with weapons. We've hurt them, but not enough. 1 ship against 3 dreadnoughts? We were never going to walk away from this." Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner looked up from his weapons station. His young face was pale, but his voice was calm. "Sir, what about the refugees? Will ramming 1 ship be enough to save them?" Jake studied the enemy formation. The 3 Cathani dreadnoughts were closing in, trying to surround the Defiant. Their massive weapons were charging up for another devastating attack. "If we can take out their lead ship, it will damage their formation," Jake explained. "The other 2 ships will be confused, maybe hesitant. That might give the refugee fleet enough time to complete their hyperspace jump." Chief Engineer Maria Rodriguez spoke through the ship's communication system from the engine room. "Captain, I've been listening to the bridge conversation. If you want ramming speed, I can overload the reactor. When we hit them, the explosion will be much bigger." Jake felt a cold knot in his stomach. Maria was talking about turning their ship into a bomb. A very large bomb that would take out not just the enemy ship, but everyone on the Defiant as well. "Maria, are you certain about this?" "Yes, sir. If I overload the reactor just before impact, the explosion will be powerful enough to destroy even a Cathani dreadnought." "But sir, there's no way to survive it. The radiation alone would kill us instantly." Lieutenant Commander Helen Brooks turned around from her pilot station. Her blonde hair was messy from the battle, and her flight suit was stained with sweat. "Captain, I need to know right now. Are we really doing this?" Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. These people had trusted him with their lives. They had followed his orders without question, even when those orders led them into an impossible battle. Navigator Lieutenant Ben Carter checked his instruments one more time. "Captain, the refugee ships need 3 more minutes to complete their hyperspace preparations." 3 minutes, 3 minutes. Jake had to keep the enemy busy for 3 more minutes, and then 40,000 innocent people would be safe. He opened a ship-wide communication channel so everyone on the Defiant could hear him. "All hands, this is the captain. In a few moments, I'm going to ask you to do something that no crew should ever have to do. I'm going to ask you to give your lives to save strangers." The ship was completely quiet except for the hum of damaged systems and the distant sound of repair crews working frantically. "The people on those refugee ships have never met us," Jake continued. "They don't know our names. They don't know where we come from or what we believe in. But they are innocent and they deserve to live. He paused, thinking about his next words carefully. I won't order anyone to stay. If you want to take an escape pod, you can do it now. There's no shame in wanting to live. But if you stay, we end this together. We save those people together. Jake waited. He listened for the sound of people leaving their stations, heading for the escape pods. He heard nothing. Sir, came a voice over the communication system. It was Petty Officer Danny Kim from the engineering section. Speaking for the engine room crew, we're staying. Weapons division staying put. Captain, added Sergeant Roy Johnson from the gun decks. One by one, every section of the ship reported the same thing. Nobody was leaving. The entire crew of the Defiant had decided to stay and fight to the end. Jake felt a strange mixture of pride and sadness. He was proud to command such brave people, but sad that their courage was going to cost them their lives. On the Cathani flagship, war leader Zethkar watched the human ship with growing concern. The tiny vessel had stopped its evasive maneuvers and was now flying straight toward his dreadnought at maximum speed. Forthak, what are they doing? Zethkar asked. His second-in-command studied the tactical readings with confusion. War leader, they appear to be attempting a ramming attack. But that makes no sense. Their ship is too small to cause significant damage to our hull. Zethkar had been fighting for 2 centuries. He had seen desperate attacks before, but something about this felt different. The humans were flying with too much determination, too much purpose. What is the status of their reactor? Zethkar asked. Vorthak checked his sensors. Their power output is increasing rapidly. War leader, I think they are overloading their reactor core. Suddenly, Zethkar understood. The humans weren't just ramming his ship. They were turning their vessel into a massive bomb. When it hit, the explosion would be enormous. All weapons fire on the human ship, Zethkar ordered urgently. Destroy them before they reach us. The 3 Cathani dreadnoughts opened fire with everything they had. Dozens of energy beams lanced out toward the approaching Defiant. The space around the human ship became a deadly storm of destruction. Helen Brooks flew the ship like never before. She twisted and turned through the enemy fire, using every trick she had learned in 15 years of piloting. Energy beams passed so close to the ship that they melted pieces of the outer hull. Hull breaches on multiple decks, Lisa reported. We're losing atmosphere. Emergency bulkheads are holding, added Communications Officer Lieutenant Sarah Miller. But we're taking heavy damage. The Defiant shook and bucked as near-miss explosions rocked the ship. Sparks flew from control panels and smoke filled the bridge. But the ship kept flying, kept accelerating toward the enemy. Reactor overload in progress, Maria reported from engineering. 30 seconds to maximum yield. Jake gripped his command chair as the ship was hit by another energy beam. This one punched through the armor and tore a hole in the hull near the bridge. The lights flickered and several control stations went dark. Ben, how much time do the refugees need? Jake asked. 2 minutes, Captain. Just 2 more minutes, Jake made a decision. Helen, can you keep us flying for 2 minutes? I can try, sir. But we're taking a lot of damage. Do your best. Everyone else, hang on. This is going to be rough. The Defiant continued its charge toward the enemy flagship. The ship was falling apart around them, but it kept flying. The crew stayed at their stations, doing their jobs even as death approached. With 1 minute left before impact, Jake opened the communication channel one last time. Refugee fleet, this is Captain Morrison of the Defiant. Complete your hyperspace jump immediately. Get those people to safety. Captain Morrison, came a reply from the refugee flagship. It was an older man's voice shaking with emotion. This is Captain Pete Walsh of the transport ship New Hope. We will never forget what you and your crew have done for us. Jake smiled slightly. Just keep those people safe, Captain Walsh. That's all the thanks we need. The Cathani dreadnought grew larger and larger on the main screen. Jake could see individual weapon ports and armor plates on its crystal hull. In a few seconds, the Defiant would hit that hull at ramming speed with an overloaded reactor core. 10 seconds to impact, Helen announced. Jake looked around at his crew one last time. It has been my honor to serve with all of you. The Defiant struck the Cathani dreadnought's hull like a bullet hitting a wall. For just a moment, the 2 ships seemed frozen together in space. Then Maria's overloaded reactor exploded in a flash of light that could be seen across the entire star system. The explosion was like a new star being born. The overloaded reactor of the Defiant released all its energy at once, creating a ball of plasma hotter than the surface of a sun. The blast tore through the Cathani dreadnought's crystal hull like paper. War leader Zethkar had just enough time to feel surprise before his flagship was torn apart. The massive dreadnought, which had destroyed 1,000 worlds, broke into pieces, chunks of crystal hull scattered through space, glowing from the heat of the explosion. For the first time in 200 years of conquest, a Cathani dreadnought had been destroyed. The 2 remaining enemy ships were thrown backward by the force of the explosion. Their crews, made of living crystal, were stunned by the shock waves that ran through their vessels. Many of them had served for decades without ever seeing their fleet take serious damage. Vorthak, who had been on one of the surviving ships, found himself suddenly in command of the Cathani force. His crystal form flickered with confusion and something that might have been fear. "Damage report," he ordered, his voice shaking like wind chimes in a storm. "Secondary flagship has lost main weapons," reported a tactical officer. "Third vessel reports engine damage. War leader Zethkar's ship has been completely destroyed." Vorthak stared at the space where the human ship had been. There was nothing left except cooling debris and radiation. The tiny vessel that had dared to challenge them was gone, but it had taken their most powerful ship with it. In the distance, bright flashes of light showed the refugee fleet jumping to hyperspace. The human ships disappeared one by one, carrying 40,000 civilians to safety. The humans had won, not by defeating the Cathani fleet, but by saving the people they had sworn to protect. They had paid the ultimate price, but they had accomplished their mission. News of the battle spread across human space faster than light itself. The refugee ships carried the story to every human colony, every space station, every military base. The crew of the Defiant had done something everyone thought was impossible. They had made the Cathani bleed. On Earth, Admiral Patricia Stone sat in her office reading the battle reports. She was the commander of the Earth Defense Fleet, responsible for protecting humanity's home system. Patricia was a tough woman who had fought in many battles. But the report from the Centauri system made her hands shake. "One ship," she said to her aide, Commander William Cross. "One heavy cruiser held off 3 dreadnoughts long enough to save 40,000 people." William nodded grimly. "The tactical analysis is incredible, Admiral. Captain Morrison's crew figured out how to penetrate Cathani shields. They found a weakness that no one else has discovered in 2 centuries. Patricia stood up and walked to the window of her office. Outside, she could see the shipyards where new vessels were being built. Hundreds of ships, all preparing for the war that everyone knew was coming. "William, I want every ship captain in the fleet to study this battle. I want our weapons teams to analyze exactly how the Defiant penetrated those shields. And I want our tacticians to figure out how to use this information." "Yes, Admiral. What about the crew of the Defiant? Should we recommend them for medals?" Patricia was quiet for a moment. "The highest medals we have. All of them posthumously. They saved 40,000 lives and showed us how to fight back." Across human space, the reaction was the same everywhere. The story of the Defiant became legend almost immediately. Captain Jake Morrison and his crew had proved that humanity would not go quietly into the dark. They had shown that even the mightiest enemy could be hurt if someone was brave enough to try. But the story had an even bigger impact on the Cathani themselves. Vorthak stood in the command center of his ship, studying reports from across the galaxy. For 200 years, the Cathani Dominion had swept through space like an unstoppable force. They had crushed every enemy, conquered every world, destroyed every fleet that stood against them. Now, for the first time, they had been stopped. "The other Cathani fleets are requesting new orders," reported a communication officer. "They want to know if the human resistance changes our invasion plans." Vorthak considered this carefully. The humans had only destroyed 1 ship, true. The Cathani still had thousands of dreadnoughts spread across the galaxy. But something fundamental had changed. "What do our intelligence reports say about human military strength?" Vorthak asked. "They have approximately 1,200 warships scattered across 50 star systems. Most of their vessels are smaller than our dreadnoughts, but some are quite powerful." Vorthak did the calculations in his head. If every human ship fought like the Defiant, if they all used the same tactics to penetrate Cathani shields, the humans could inflict serious damage on the Dominion fleet. "Send a message to all fleet commanders," Vorthak decided. "The invasion of human space is to proceed, but with caution. These humans are not like the other species we have conquered. They fight differently." On a space station near the border of human territory, Captain Pete Walsh of the refugee ship New Hope sat in a small bar with some of his passengers. These were people who had lost everything when the Cathani destroyed the Centauri colonies, but they were alive thanks to the crew of the Defiant. "Tell me again about Captain Morrison," asked a young girl named Emma Chen. She was maybe 10 years old, with dark hair and serious eyes. Her parents had died when Centauri fell, but she had escaped on the New Hope. Pete smiled sadly. "Captain Morrison was a good man, Emma. He and his crew gave their lives to save us. They could have run away, but they didn't. They stayed and fought because it was the right thing to do." "Were they scared?" Emma asked. "Probably," Pete admitted. "I would have been scared. But being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do what's right even when you are afraid." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "When I grow up, I want to be like Captain Morrison." Pete looked around the bar at the other refugees. There were families, children, old people, workers, teachers, 40,000 human beings who were alive because one ship and its crew had refused to abandon them. "I think a lot of people want to be like Captain Morrison," Pete said. Months later, a monument was built on Earth in memory of the Defiant and her crew. It was a simple black stone with the names of everyone who had died in the battle. At the bottom there was an inscription that read, "They held the line." But the real monument to the Defiant was what happened next. The human military studied the battle and learned how to fight the Cathani. New weapons were developed based on the Defiant's tactics. New strategies were created that used speed and courage to overcome superior firepower. When the Cathani Dominion finally launched their full invasion of human space, they found an enemy that was ready for them. The humans fought with the same determination that Jake Morrison and his crew had shown. They used the same tactics, the same weapons, the same refusal to give up. The war that followed was long and brutal, but humanity survived. Not because they were stronger than the Cathani, but because they had learned something important from the crew of the Defiant. Sometimes one ship can make all the difference. Sometimes a small group of brave people can change the course of history. Sometimes holding the line is enough to save the world. The Cathani had conquered the galaxy with ease, crushing every enemy they encountered. But when they reached human space, they found something they had never faced before. They found a people who would not surrender. They found a species that would fight for strangers, sacrifice for the innocent, and hold the line no matter what the cost. They had conquered the worlds with ease, until a single human ship held the line and everything changed.